Every person has their own unique story to tell. Some people are loud and proud to tell anyone that's happened to them in this life. Then, some people are just quiet in life. There are those people who tell their story to you, and you're simply amazed by their stories. What's this story about? This is a story of Creighton Hobbs. This is a story of triumph over tragedy.
When I hear the term miracle child, to me that signifies something miraculous has happened, something great and wonderful to this child that has happened. And with me, I was termed a miracle child because, one, my mother, she could not carry me. From what I understand in the story of it, that she did get pregnant, that the doctors told her that it would be a possibility that I wouldn't be born. It might kill not only me, but my mother as well.
Well, when Lee and Forrest they're beginning to get past the babyish stage, I'd say. Lee was about 7, a little over 7 years old, and Forrest a little over 5. Mom said she wanted another baby. And so she'd been having some problems, but she went to Dr. Abel in Mobile, gynecologist, one of the best ones really in Mobile. And he diagnosed her with endometriosis and said it's going to be tough to have any more children. And even if conceived, it's going to be tough to carry him. So, but she wanted one, and she did. She conceived. It was not a pregnancy that endangered life, but it was one that was not comfortable. She was in pain, hurt a lot. I remember the last month we were all going to the movies to see. I forget the name of the movie, but it was one of those that everybody wanted to see, and that was in 1975, and we've yet to see it. This is the year 2020, but maybe we'll see it. But anyway, we had to come back home. She was hurting so bad. So it wasn't long after that her water broke, and so it was in the middle of the night, and hated to call the doctor in the middle of the night, so we waited till daybreak, and we called him, and they said, come on. So we had a little small station wagon, and it was, I can't remember the make of the car, but it was a pretty little car, but little. And so we put the kids in the back, and we had to wake them up and get them dressed and put them in the back, and we took off for Mobile. And in those days, that was before the interstate, I-10. And so you had 2 routes. You could go all the way down through Pascagoula and get on Highway 90 and go in that way, which would hit some traffic going to the paper mill and that. So we always went what we called the back way. And it was very rural, old Mississippi roads, narrow roads, not very well kept up. And they had potholes, and so we set out. I would say it was about an hour and 15-minute drive all the way to the Mobile Infirmary, and it was just terrible. I mean, we trying to get there as fast as we could because she was in labor, and we hit one pothole right through there. It just seemed like they were just numberless, and so she was in terrible pain the whole way. So we finally got to the Alabama state line, and the road smoothed out, and we were able to get down Airport Boulevard to what we call the Belt Line, and then over to Mobile Infirmary. Got there in time, and well, we got there, and we still had the other 2 kids, so I had to call Shirley's mother and she sent her husband Ed. He come got the other 2 kids. I went, once they were taken care of, I went back there with her. In those days, that was something new, just to be in the back with her. Once you went into labor, normally you were relegated to the waiting room, but I stayed back with her until she went into labor and delivery. And so she went into labor and delivery. As he was being born, she said, "Oh, I've got a red-headed girl," but actually it was a blonde-headed boy. And they brought her out. She was on a rolling bed type thing, and Creighton was wrapped up in just like a papoose type thing, and all you could see was his face. And so I didn't know what he was or what, so I said, he just looked like a little red ball. And she said, "It's another boy," like she was so excited. Like all that time she'd wanted a girl, and the way she said it was like that's the very thing she wanted. It's another boy. So that's the night he came into the world, and that was in January the 8th of 1976, 44 years ago today.
What can I say? I am just lucky to be here. That, or you can say that there is a reasoning for me to be here. And to me, I think it's more romantic, it's more poetic, it's more beautiful if there is a reasoning why I am here, because I think there's a reasoning for all of us to be here. And for me to carry that term, a miracle child, to me is an honor. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful, wonderful thing. Well, as you can see, I am a 80s kid, and this story takes place in 1982, and I want to tell you, it was great. It was a great summer. It was the summer of 1982. Everything was wonderful in Escatawpa, Mississippi. Kids were out in the park. They were playing. You would come home during the lunchtime and eat. You would eat your peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or your sandwich or whatever you had for lunch. Then you'd go right back outside, and then you would play till the sun went down, and you just hung out with all of your friends, and most of all, you would get to play baseball, neighborhood baseball, with all your pals and friends, and you would just have the best day in the world, just tossing the ball around and having a great, wonderful day, and just playing all day long. And baseball is just the name of the game, I guess, right? This is where things take a turn for the worse. It was the 1982 summer, and we were playing baseball, and I was playing pitcher, and all I can think of when I think of this, what happened to me, it was just a horrible, horrible accident. It was just something that I don't think I'll ever forget in my life, of this horrible accident that happened.
When Creighton was brought into the Singing River Hospital emergency room, myself and other doctors and nurses noticed right away Creighton's face was so swollen that all you could see was his eyes. His nose was completely shattered, and Creighton was unconscious. There was blood pouring out of his eyes, ears, and mouth. When we got Creighton stabilized, and after getting the x-ray results of the damage that had been done to his young skull, I immediately rushed him into ICU for ice treatment on his face to bring down his swelling. Less than 24 hours of being in the ICU, the swelling was reduced from the cold ice treatments, and the swelling had went down enough for us to perform surgery. We had to completely rebuild his nose and drain all the blood that was backing up in his little skull. The surgery only took a few hours, and he survived. After surgery, Creighton spent 2 nights in ICU and then was released to a regular room for about 4 days. After a few days and checking up on him, we released Creighton from the Singing River Hospital to go home and get some rest.
As you can see, I did survive it. And to this day, I have a little bit of a fear of baseball. Not like I can watch the game on television and I can sort of be around it, but it's just when I hear that bat, that is when you'll see me jump. And it's like that is something that still to this day that happened many years ago that still stays with me because I almost died. I should have died by today's standards. There's just something that was protecting me, and I don't know if it was my guardian angel or if it was luck or what, but I can say that I am very happy to be here, and I was very happy to survive that.
One thing that you really have to do is move forward. You gotta really tackle this. I've always been independent. I've always had courage. But I didn't always own my diabetes. This silent killer has tried to kill me more ways than one way.
1 year later, 1983, I have gotten over the whole thing that happened with the baseball deal. I began to notice that I was having problems, and I noticed that I was thirsty all the time. I was using the bathroom constantly. I felt itchy all over, and I noticed that I was more irritable than usual. I felt weird. I felt odd. And I remember going and standing under the carport with my dad.
Back then, maybe every other year, through the pharmacy, we could get trips. We had been to Europe, and we'd been to Hawaii, and we've been on at least one cruise, and so we were doing that as our vacation. And so this year we had planned to go to Acapulco, Mexico, and the trip was paid for. We were ready. And in fact, I think just one day away, the next day. And so Creighton had been having problems. He was itching all over. He was going to the bathroom a lot, drinking water, always thirsty. Shirley said, well, I think maybe we better take him to Dr. Calhoun and see something's not right. So it hit my mind, those are the symptoms of diabetes. Surely this baby doesn't have diabetes. He was just 7 years old. And so I kind of put it out of my mind. And so we were also, in the meantime, building on to our house. And so we had this bulldozer, and it was in the yard, and it was just bulldozing up dirt and moving it. And Creighton and I were standing out there in the back before I went to work, watching the bulldozer work. And I kept thinking about that. I said, surely not diabetes. And so I had to go on to work, and she took Creighton down to Dr. Calhoun. And it wasn't long Dr. Calhoun called me. He said his blood sugar's off the chart. He won't even pick it up. He has diabetes. And who do you want who do you want him to see as far as a pediatrician? And so I told him the name of a pediatrician, and he put him in the hospital. And sure enough, he did have diabetes. So the next day he was in the hospital, and that was the day we were supposed to go to Acapulco. So we have yet to go to Acapulco. But now I have no desire to go to Acapulco.
I remember when I went to the hospital with diabetes. I was in there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The first week, or first 5 days, it was normal. It was like, what is this kid doing in here? And then it went nuts like a roller coaster, and it just mainly went high, 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 high. And this is in the 80s, and they did not have as much knowledge as they do now about diabetes. They pricked, the nurses and doctors and everybody pricked my fingers so much that I couldn't even move them. They were swelled, my fingers. I remember I could barely move them like that. It was horrible. My fingers were just swollen almost together. Like, it was just absolutely horrible going through that. I remember when I went to the hospital with diabetes. I was in there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The first week, or first 5 days, it was normal. It was like, what is this kid doing in here? And then it went nuts like a roller coaster, and it just mainly went high, 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 high. And this is in the 80s, and they did not have as much knowledge as they do now about diabetes. They pricked, the nurses and doctors and everybody pricked my fingers so much that I couldn't even move them. They were swelled, my fingers. I remember I could barely move them like that. It was horrible. My fingers were just swollen almost together. Like, it was just absolutely horrible going through that. I was somebody that should have died. About 7 years old. I should have already kicked the bucket. And I didn't. For whatever reasoning, I do not know why, but I can say that I am thankful every single day of my life. Now, with me having diabetes, believe me, they call this the silent killer. And this is something that is very true. Like right now, I have eye problems. I am ate up with diabetic neuropathy. I cannot digest a meal normally. It's I wake up sometimes at night and I'm just screaming in pain. It's what I like to say. This is a gift that just keeps on giving, but it's gifts that you don't want. But this is diabetes, and they call it the silent killer. I am not going to take life for granted. I am going to live each and every day, hour by hour, to the fullest and to the max. And I am going to take lemons and turn them into lemonade. But I guess sugar-free lemonade for me. But I am just here to say that if you know somebody with diabetes, give them a little extra love. Give them a little extra hug, because they have the fight of their life literally ahead of them for the rest of their life. It's 1994. I was in Moss Point High School. Let me explain about this point in my life. Now, at this point in my life, I was going off the deep, utter end. And Moss Point High School was rather gangster, if you will, because there was several, and I mean several, racial riots. This high school was just like extremely, the only way to put it is that it was segregated. When I mean segregated, when you think of segregation that took place in the 60s, well, it was like that, except the roles was reversed. For example, I will give you a fine example, and this happened more than once with me personally. I went to a water fountain to get something to drinking water, and when I went to this water fountain, I was told by an African American young man to not drink from this water fountain. It's not for white people. And I asked him, where am I supposed to go? And he said, I don't care. You can go drink water at the toilet as far as I'm concerned. Also, when I was in high school, I had knives to my door. I was threatened to be gang raped. I was into fights constantly. I had to fight to literally survive. It was so bad at this high school that they had 2 fully armed police officers that was at the school. That was completely the Billy Club, it was Moss Point Police Department officers that was there to keep the peace. And they did a good job at it. And when I was at Moss Point, it was a college education into being a full-fledged gangster. I can say this about Moss Point High School. I never want to go back to it. I never want to be a part of that. I never want to be a part of that hate, that racism, that horribleness that I was put through. That's why I have completely turned over, one of the reasonings of why I turned over a new leaf. And I can tell you that it's not good to live with hate in your heart. Alright, I was in high school in 1994, and I quit school about 3 months before I graduated. And when I went to go and quit school, there was only one teacher that begged me not to quit. She just literally, there was only one teacher out of the whole facility that gave a crap. And, but I quit anyway. I had enough. I remember when I had turned 18, I knew legally I could quit. And that's what I did in January of 1994. I had got the paper signed by each one of my teachers. As I was walking out of the high school, I looked at the principal, and I gave the principal that. I said a few not nice words to her, and out the door I went. Now, I would like to explain this. I was completely and utterly I was drinking. I was I would say an alcoholic. And I would say I was a full-fledged drug addict. I was doing everything from heroin to cocaine to marijuana to, as on top of all that, alcohol. I quit school. I got kicked out of my house because I had become such a handful to my parents, and I do not blame them. They was like, yeah, you've got to go. And I got kicked out, and I got an apartment. Oh God, it was a real shitty apartment. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, this is just, ugh. And this apartment was told to me by the Dixie Mafia, one of the members of the Dixie Mafia. They didn't want me to get in the crime of life, whatever that thing, that sort of thing that they was in, but they knew me, they knew my dad, they knew my family, and they was like, well, we don't want you sleeping out on the bridge, so why don't you try this place? And I went there, and they let me have that place and I stayed there for about 2 weeks till I got evicted. Now, I had the money to pay the rent. I had more money because I was selling drugs left and right. I mean, I was making just stacks of money with my drug dealings. When I got evicted from there, and me just not thinking right from the drug haze that I had, we went to a guy's house, his name was Butch. Butch, and I can understand Butch, he was just a guy that looked at a bunch of 18 and 20-year-old kids, and he's like, I do not want these kids sleeping out under the bridge or in the woods. He's like, you just come to my house. And he opened his doors and he let us stay there. It was me and about 2 or 3 other people. Well, as we were staying there, we contemplated and talked about, just basically bully talked about robbing a little hamburger drive-in place called Lennop's Drive-In. And this is how messed up on drugs we were. And so we would just talk about this, not thinking that it would actually happen. I didn't anyway. One night, I was told to go to my car, and I went to my car, and I was met by everybody there, and they said that they was going to rob Lennop's Drive-In, and I was going to drop them off, and do like what we talked about. And my first instinct was no, but I saw that they had a lot of guns with them. So I got into the car and I took them and I went down there. It was about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I pulled up just like this. I pulled over exactly right here. They was in the back. They got out of the vehicle and they went to the middle of the field where they had their guns, and they went to the woods to go rob Lennop's. And when they got to about that halfway point where that burn pile is, that's when I looked back over here. And I hurried and left just as soon as possible. After I left there, after dropping them off at this place, the Lennop's Drive-In, well, I went home and I was absolutely hysterical, but I did not know how to mention this to my mom or my dad. I was like, what are you supposed to say? Hey, Mom, guess what? We just robbed Lennop's Drive-In. And I didn't know what to do. And not to mention that I had a lot of drugs running through me. And, well, I thought in my head, okay, I'm going to go back to Butch's, get my insulin stuff, and then after that, just hit the road and take off and have nothing to do with it. Go back to Butch's. I am met by a person that is there that robbed him, and he had a gun in his hand, and he said, "We got to go pick up the other ones." So we got into the vehicle, me, him, and actually another person, and we was driving around and in Escatawba, Mississippi, and we was going down this long dark road, and I finally had enough, and I said, "Dude, I'm done with this. I am turning this car around. I'm going back to Butch's." And he said, "Oh, no, you're not." And he had a gun in his hand. I told him, I said, "If you've got that gun, you better put it to my brain, and you better pull that trigger and shoot a bullet right here in my head, and make sure you kill me. Because if you don't, I'm going to beat you to death with that gun. Now put that gun up." And that's what he did. He put the gun down. He saw that I was very upset. Driving down this dark road, back to Butch's, and there I see them two, walking down the road. And I pulled over. They had their little money bag, and they got in the car. We went back to Butch's. When we got back to Butch's, for some weird reason, we ordered Waffle House. I ate food, and I was so stressed out about all of this that I went and I shot up some heroin. And after I shot that heroin up, I went into the living room and I grabbed a bottle of vodka and I drank a fifth, I guess you would say. It's a whole fifth. And I just downed a whole fifth of vodka. And then I passed out. Well, I felt someone pushing on my chest, and she was saying, "Wake up, baby, wake up." Yeah, she was pushing, and she was trying, and I woke up. I said, "What do you want?" And then when I woke up, I looked around, and I saw nothing but cops everywhere. I saw police lights, police cars. I saw a police officer that was there, and he saw me, and he said, he's like, "Come here, Creighton, come here." Well, I got up and went outside with him. And he knew the whole story. He knew everything that had happened. He's like, "Is that what happened?" I said, "Yes, sir, it did." He said, "Do you know your Miranda rights?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Do you want handcuffs or not?" "Preferably no." And he said, "Well, just walk yourself back to my car and get yourself in there." So I walked myself to the police car and opened the door and got in. Very odd arrest, but okay. And I was taken with everybody else to Moss Point Jail.
I think in the morning, I was at work, and of course, I got a telephone call every 3 minutes when I was in those days. Phone call. It was Brian Knopf, and he said that Creighton had been arrested and was in jail. And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, he was arrested for robbery. And I said, "Well, what do you know about it?" He said, "That's all I know. I was calling to see if you knew." I said, "No, I didn't know anything." So I phoned, I had some friends down at the Moss Point Police Department. And so after Brian hung up, I called down there, and sure enough, they confirmed. And I said, "What happened?" They said, "Well, the ice cream place had been held up, and he was involved in it." And so I said, "Well, what involvement?" And they said he was driving the car. And so we were just shocked and overwhelmed, just didn't know what to do. So got in touch, were able to talk to him, and then we called attorney in Pascagoula, Sid Cumbest. So Sid got busy and helped us.
I mean, it was weird. They gave you 2 meals a day, and breakfast was usually cold. It was nastiness, just pure nasty. I'll never forget at supper, they gave us gizzards, raw beef liver, and chitlins. Gross. I mean, it was just nastiness. After having this delicacy of food brought, to you, you got transferred to another place called ADC, which is Adult Detention Center. Now, by this time, 2 of the other people have been bailed out, so there's just me and 2 of the other ones. So there's 3 of us riding in the back of this cop car going to the Adult Detention Center in Pascagoula. On our way to the ADC, this cop pulled over, and there was a field, and it was had trees in it and things like that. I'll never forget it. He pulled over, and no kidding, he turned around and said, "I will let each and every one of y'all go." He said, "I will open up this door, undo your handcuffs, and you can take off running." He said, "But I get to take 2 shots at each and every one of you." This guy was serious about this. He wasn't playing. I mean, he really wanted to let us run and make a game out of it and shoot us. This wasn't something that was like, oh, he was just playing. No, this guy, he intentionally wanted to let us go and then shoot us. We all just sat in the back of the car, and it's like, "No, we're good. Just take us to ADC. No, we're good." So after that life-threatening ordeal, or getting our lives threatened, we went to the ADC. I was in the ADC for probably a couple more days, and then I got bailed out. My mother and father took mercy on me, but they saw where I was sobered up, and they saw where just regretful and sorry about what I had done. After a long period of time, and now this is during the time when O.J. Simpson his case was going on and all of that. When I went to court, the judge sentenced me to 3 years of probation for the charge of robbery. That's what it was. 3 years of very strict probation, and I got a charge of robbery. I had a team of lawyers. I had the O.J. Simpson, literally, of lawyers. I had 3 of them. I don't know what exactly they were doing, but I don't know if they were wheeling and dealing or this and that or what. But all I know is that judge did not give me the charge of armed robbery because he said I was not at the actual location.
From there, it went on for a long time, over a year. In fact, we had already built our house and was over here in Grand Bay by the time it was all settled, but it was all settled, I guess, to the best it could possibly be settled.
I paid for it. Me and my family, we about went bankruptcy. It was awful. I want to say this one little bit before I say anything else. The Lieutenant Governor of Mississippi during that time, which was probably 95 through 98, whoever the Lieutenant Governor of Mississippi was, he used my case in the papers and press to get a law passed in Mississippi. And the law states that if you have knowledge of a armed robbery, you have any prior knowledge of anything, then you are going to get the same exact sentence as the actual person who did it. So, you can thank me for, I guess, help getting that law passed. What can I say about everything that I went through? Every time I look at myself in the mirror, I remember what I put my parents through. I remember what I put my family through. I remember what I put myself through. It's not worth it. The life of crime, the life of not doing right, it's totally 100% wrong, and it's not worth it. And if you are on that track, if you are not making a living like you should be making, it's going to catch up with you. Some way, somehow, karma's going to catch up. When it does, you don't need to whine and cry about it, because you chose that life, and you've got to reap what you sow and get out of it. If you're in that life, please get out of that criminal life. It is so not worth it. I will always and tell anybody this message. Well, to start this off, I should go off and say I have had 26 car wrecks, 26 of them. And out of those 26, I believe about 6 of them, those vehicles were completely and utterly total destroyed. Like you see them in those ad magazines where they're just crumpled up and stuff like that. Well, that is basically what I have been through in life with it. Now, out of the 26 car wrecks and the 6 that were completely crushed and totaled, there was one that I will share with you. I believe it took place in the early 2000s, and I saved up my money and I bought me a Ford Mustang. I loved it. Loved this car. Well, when I got this car, I went to a friend of mine's house, and I was just visiting. And when I was at his house, I noticed my blood sugar, it was dropping low. Now, when the blood sugar of a diabetic goes low, you got to eat to bring it high. It's kind of like fuel for a car. And that's what I needed. I needed some sugar. I needed some carbohydrates. I needed something. And I was at this friend's house, and I was like, dude, I need something to eat. My blood sugar's dropping. And he, honest to God, he looked at me and said, I don't have anything. He's like, the only thing I got in my house is cockroaches. And he wasn't lying. He had 1 can of tomato soup. Well, I left because I knew that it was dropping. And I got into my Mustang, and where I was at to my house was only about 15 minutes away. And I knew I could make it. I just knew, I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to hurry up and go home, and then I'll make it and I'll be fine. Well, about 2 to 3 miles away from my house, that's when things went wrong.
Awful day. It was. It must have been in the summer, because it was still daylight when I was coming home from work. Crossed over onto Dawes Road, and there was a wreck in front of me, and cars were pulled over. You could go through, but it was cars everywhere, and it was a car turned upside downwards. And so I pulled over just to see what was going on, because I figured it was somebody in our neighborhood. And so a lot of people talking about it, and I said, well, what happened exactly? They said, well, it was a terrible wreck that a man drunk was driving this car, and he was speeding and going all over the road sideways and everything, and the police were chasing him, and he hit this small truck and just demolished the truck, and it was gone when I got there, but the car was upside down. He said, and the driver of the car was in bad shape. They had to send a helicopter, and it landed up there in the cotton field right there behind me, and he said they had air lifted him to the hospital. And I was looking at the car, and I said, well, what kind of a car? What car? What brand? They said, I don't know. It was in bad shape, upside down, just smashed. And I'm colorblind, so I really didn't know what color it was, and I didn't recognize the car because it was so torn up. And so I come home, and my mother was sitting at the kitchen table, and Shirley was there, and I told him, there's been a terrible, terrible wreck up the road, and two people, they say, are hurt very, very bad. And Shirley said, well, does it look like Creighton's car? I said, I don't think so. I couldn't tell. It was upside down and just torn up. And so we went on supper and everything, and Creighton never came home. Okay. But a lot of times he would come home later than we stayed up, and so because it was work days and I had to go on to bed. So I didn't sleep much during the night because I kept waiting to hear the car pull in the drive, and it never came, and I was getting really, really worried about that. And so about daylight, the telephone rang, and I answered the phone. I had a phone beside my bed, and they said it was the Mobile Infirmary. And would I come down there? There'd been a wreck. And I said, well, what can you tell me? And she said, I can't tell you anything. Just come down. I said, well, is he alive? And she said, well, I will tell you that. He's alive. And I said, well, can you tell me what condition he's in? And she said, well, he's got broken legs and punctured lungs and other things besides that. I said, but that's all I'm going to tell you. You'll have to come on down here. So I jumped up and got my clothes on, called somebody to come in for me at the pharmacy, and luckily I was able to get somebody, and I run down there to see, and sure enough, he was in terrible condition, just in terrible, and so was the other man. He was in horrible condition too. I got in touch with Shirley, and she got ready, and she got down there. And we called Brother Sullivan, and he came down there. When he walked into the room, he just broke down crying. He was in such a bad condition. But
after I had the car wreck, I woke up and I was in ICU. I looked down and I had cast on my feet. I had all this stuff on me. I mean, I was just like, what's going on? And I looked over to my left, and there was my mom. And I asked my mother, what happened? And she said, well, I'm glad you're alive. And I was like, me too, but what's going on? She said, well, you had a horrible wreck. Mom, what's wrong with me? And she told me, she said, well, you've got 2 broken legs. You got a rib sticking in your lung. She said, you also got bleeding on the brain there. And you got all cut up and bruised up. And the doctor should be in here. And unless he can find something else wrong with you, I think that's about it. Thanks, Mom. And when the doctor come in, he explained everything what happened and this and that, and I was like, okay, well, I was like, my gosh, what? I had no idea because I blanked out. And when I found out what exactly happened was that after I had the wreck, the Jaws of Life had to come in and pry open the door to the car, and they had to cut me out to get me out of there, and they stuck me on the helicopter and flew me to the hospital.
the doctor said he would be all right. It probably might have a limp or something because his ankles were broke, and it was just a mess. And they thought his lung would mend, and so it did. But it took him a long time to get over it. Really hadn't totally back to where he would have been if he had not had the wreck.
When I got out of the hospital, I remember I was in a wheelchair, and I was actually bedridden for months. I could not walk at all until my ankles were healed strong enough for me to begin therapy. So anytime I had to go anywhere or do anything, I was in a wheelchair, wheeling around. And I remember going through the process of trying to relearn how to walk again. It was a healing process because it showed me that you never, and I mean you never, ever, ever take life for granted. Because just in a blink of an eye, just like what I had with that wreck, it can end. All in just like that. You know, I remember thinking about all the times I have died and come back to life. I have died 5 times. 5. And come back. But out of those 5, I remember one that I had a evangelical experience. I had something that I would never forget. Now, you may be asking, why did I die? I remember because I was living with my grandmother in Chickasaw, Alabama, and I went to go have my wisdom teeth removed. And they had to put me under, as in put me to sleep, open me up, and get them out. I had complications. When I got home, that's where my blood sugar it went nuts.
Creighton had gotten really, really sick, and he had passed completely out, and he was in the little half bath right outside the kitchen, unconscious. And obviously the door, it was open or something, because my mother, his grandmother, found him. And she called me. She said, he's laying on the floor, unconscious. And she was old, sick, and had back problems. I said, well, don't try to pick him up. Now, don't try to pick him up. Leave him alone. Just he'll be all right laying there, and we'll get some help. Well, about that time, Shirley came in. So I said, well, just wait. I'm on my way, and I'll be there in just a second, maybe 20 minutes, and we'll get him to the hospital. And so, of course, before Shirley came, my mother somehow got him and picked him up. I don't know how she did it. She was really in bad shape herself. But anyway, he was unconscious, and Shirley got there. And so I got there, and so we decided we would go in 2 cars. She said, well, follow me. So she took off. She went down Dawes Road, crossed over Grand Bay Wilmer, and was headed down Fort Lakes Road. Well, the bridges were out. She was not aware of that, and I didn't think to tell her because I didn't even think she would go that way. I thought she'd turn on Grand Bay Wilmer and head towards I-10, but she did not. And so she was headed, and she was in the faster and better car. I was in my old Ford 150 truck, 1988. So I finally got enough power out of that thing to pass her and to slow down in front of her. And she finally got her pulled over, and I stopped. I said, we're going to have to turn around. And we'd gone a long ways down the road. Really, time was of the essence, but we'd wasted that time. I said, the bridges are out. They're tearing the bridges up, and we can't go this way. So we had to turn back around and go back to
the trauma of the surgery and this and that. I was immediately rushed to the hospital.
One of the nurses at the ER was a was a friend of ours, and so they rushed him on in, and I remember her taking care of him.
And when I got into the hospital, they said that the doctor, I remember hearing a voice, a doctor saying, "Son, don't go, don't go. Hold on, son, just hold on, don't do it." I remember after I flatlined, I was seeing a white light. It was here. It was like a little bitty ball of white light. It become closer to me, and I felt like I was floating in the air, and I was like in this black tunnel, and I saw this white light. As I was floating towards this white light, what I like to say is that I had a warm feeling. It felt like if you've ever been away from home and then you come home and you just have that warm, great love, affection, and feeling of, I'm home. That's what it felt like. I remember going towards this white light, this voice saying to me,
Creighton, it's not your time.
"What do you mean it's not my time?"
There's still a lot of things you have to do back on Earth.
And I said, "What?"
You got to go back.
I said, "What do you mean? I want to go. I want to go there. This is where I want to go."
I know you do, but you can't, because it's not your time. You got to go back. There are people that need you.
And like that, I was brought back. When I was brought back, I was in ICU, and I had life support machine, helping me breathe. I had all of this stuff. It was just crazy. I looked like some kind of weird lab experiment. And I will never forget that when I was waking up and my eyes were opening, I saw this Jamaican nurse who was there.
Oh, baby, I'm so glad you're awake. I'm so happy you're here and back with us. Lord, help me. You got some beautiful green eyes. You want me to get all that stuff out of you? Alright, I'm going to tell the doctor you woke up, and then we can get that stuff out of you. I'm so happy you're awake. I'll be back, baby.
After the Jamaican nurse, after she left, I stayed up for a minute, and then I went back to sleep because I was exhausted. And when they take all that stuff out of you, it's just exhausting. Well, when I woke back up, there was a nurse that was there. She was from England. As soon as she saw me, I heard this.
"Oh, hello, love."
And of course, I am kind of confused, and I just said, "Hi, how are you?"
"I love your name, Crichton. That is the name of our favorite character on the telly. I'm so happy for you to be awake. And if you need anything, we are here to help you, love."
And after she said that to me, I was kind of confused on things. I remember my father was there, and I said, "Dad, did I just hear..." I was like, because last night I spoke to somebody from Jamaica, and this morning I spoke to somebody from England. Am I? And he was like, "No, you're right." Okay, yeah, because I'm in Mobile, Alabama right now, right? And you are. Okay, good. Just make sure, Dad. My dad, he had left, and I will never forget it because I had my great uncle. He showed up, and when he showed up, I told him exactly what I had experienced. And my great uncle, he looked at me and he said, "Son, that is absolutely amazing." And he said, "I want to tell you, you know who I think you heard?" I said, "No, sir, I don't know." He said, "I think you heard your grandfather." He said, "I think you heard your grandfather, my brother who died in World War II. I was just shocked, floored by that, because my grandfather was killed in World War II in combat. And I'm like, what? So that, to me, it made me feel good, knowing that that may have been my guardian angel.
But he was in bad shape, and he was unconscious for, I think, till the next morning. He finally came around. They got his blood sugar leveled out, but it was excessively high. And he was in ketosis, the whole thing. It was terrible. But they got him straightened out. That was about the worst shape I think he ever got in.
I can say this, there's a lot of stories of people who say they, seen something or this and that, but when I hear people tell stories like they saw horses running and with chariots, and then they saw, and all this weird stuff, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't buy what they're trying to sell. But when I hear stories that are similar to mine, and they have the same aspect, and believable, and just that wonderful, realistic type of view, then I will listen. But I can't say this. I am so blessed because I have died and come back to life 5 times. And I'm still here. And I still must have more reasonings of why God has spared me. With everybody, you as a human being, and everybody in the world, things in life that you need, as in sleep, food, and a purpose. But there's something else that I think that we all need, and that's friendship, kinship. We've got to have that one person that you can call in the middle of the night and just pour your heart out to. Not everybody has that, but I can say that I have that. I have that with somebody that I'm very close to and I love very dearly, Bernice. Me and Bernice, we met, I think, in 2006-ish, something to that effect. And we have always just had a awesome, wonderful connection.
Me and Creighton met through, I believe it was a chat, was it MySpace or Facebook? It was one of them. And we instantly connected and talked. I believe me and him met the day after we started talking.
Yes, we dated, but we've realized through years and years of on and off dating that we are just better off friends. we don't go as a couple. It just don't work. She is married now and she's happy, and it makes me happy. There has been a lot of times that Bernice has been in trouble. She has made those phone calls to me, and she told me that she was in trouble or something was happening, something like that.
Up there, I was a photographer, got a job taking pictures of people's kids, and I got a ride up to Kennedy, Alabama, where he tried to kidnap me, and I called my mom. She couldn't help me. And so I called Creighton. I'm not sure if my mom called Creighton or I called Creighton. But Creighton came all the way to York, Alabama, and met them halfway. When I got to his car, I was hypothermic. Really bad hypothermic. And he threw his jacket over me and turned his heater on full blast and got me something to eat because I hadn't eaten, and I couldn't even remember how long it was when the last time I had ate, before that had happened. But I didn't eat at that dude's house. So I was starving, but yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, it was a Philly steak. I probably would have died. There was no way of finding me out there. It was so far up in Alabama where there was no bus stations. If I needed a bus, I couldn't call out 911 because my phone wouldn't work, and that's how far in the woods we were, so that kind of scared me, and after that I quit photography. So
Sure enough, I would always come there. I would always do that. Why? Because she is someone very dear to me. And all of my friends, they're like family to me.
Creighton is my best friend. He has known me the longest. Creighton is my best friend. I've known him the longest out of anybody I've ever really known. I trust him with my life. He pretty much is, like I said, my bestest friend.
When I think about Bernice, I think about she is the type of friend where I can call, and as long as she's like not watching The Walking Dead or one of her favorite TV shows or something to that effect, she'll answer the phone, or she will eventually message me back. But she will always be there for when I need her.
Coming back from Universal Studios, and I'm not sure if this was caused by him having diabetes, but he started running off the road, and I was asleep at the time, and apparently I had a nightmare about him running off the road and flipping the car, and I felt the blood and everything. So when I woke up, I'm screaming. I don't even know what I said. He said I sounded like the exorcism of Emily Rose. But I believe he had a blackout that time. I really do, because he just went off the road and everything. But everything was all good. But there's like a lot of other times where we'll go out to eat and he had to give himself a shot. It's just different things that I stay worried about him about, especially when it comes to diabetes.
And you know what? I will always be there for when not only her, but her husband and her kids as well, when they need. To me, that is true definition of a aspect of love. Having not only your heart, but your ears open. And I think that if more of the world had that, I think this world would be a lot better place. We've all had a dream in life, whether it's being a firefighter or being a doctor or being whatever it is you may want in life. I have always wanted to make movies, make documentaries, make just stories and things of that nature. And I have been blessed and lucky enough, and I've worked very hard to do this, to make my dreams come true. Now, it wasn't all easy by no means. There was, when I first started off, I made a lot of mistakes, and I continue to make mistakes. But you learn from those mistakes, right? I remember in particular my very first film I did back, I believe in 1999 or 8 or something. It was a while back, and I think that there's actually footage I think with anybody who makes movies, you have a creative side to you. And it's very hard for anybody who is normal. When I mean normal, is somebody who you get up and you work 9 in the morning to 5 in the evening. And then you come home, you eat, and you have a family life. I think that's awesome. That's wonderful. But somebody who is a filmmaker, you have very odd hours. You have these creative thoughts that go through your brain 90 to nothing. They come in so fast that you can't even type them out or write them down fast enough. You're constantly on this new journey, this new way of wanting to express. And I have been blessed enough to have a touch of that. I think that it's going to just keep going and going and going. And I'm going to keep making documentaries just like this one and just like my previous ones and for the future ones to come. Why? Because my movies are my dreams that have come true. As I was doing pretty good making movies and that type of thing, for some reason, I always wanted to get into professional wrestling, pro wrestling. Well, I can tell you why exactly. Hold on, let me stop on this and tell you why. When I was a little boy, and I was 7, 8, 9 years old and 10, when I first got diabetes, I would go and hang out with my grandmother, who we call Big Mama, or Big Mom. But I'd hang out with Big Mama. And when I would, I'd go back there, and every day I would go and eat my snack, my diabetic snack with her. And when I did, we watched NWA, National Wrestling Alliance Wrestling from the 1980s.
This week, a special six-man tag team match pitting the Varsity Club against the Road Warriors with Paul Ellering.
And I'm pretty sure that's where that seed got planted. Now, also, the guy I grew up with, Brandon, he is like the next closest thing I've ever had to a real life brother. Me and him, we grew up with a fellow by the name of Tiny. And Tiny was in WWF known as Uncle Elmer. And he taught us a lot and showed us all that stuff. So I'm pretty sure that's when I was younger, that's where that got planted. I believe it was 2006 or 7-ish that is where I got introduced into a wrestling organization, IWC. I was introduced to Crazy Joe Fargo, Joseph Gaddis. He taught me a lot, and not only was I able to learn from Crazy Joe Fargo, but I was able to love him as a big brother. He was not just a great, wonderful friend, but he became like my big brother. Oh my gosh, I saw him go through so much in life, not only through wrestling, but just life in general. And I can say that it's moments like that that makes you pause and say, my God, I am so lucky to have that. I was so lucky to be a part of that, because IWC, it wasn't just like a bunch of people it was a family. We loved each other like family, and we still all care for each other just like a family.
I myself am entirely made of flaws, stitched together with good intentions. Even when secrets begin to surface from your brain, the truth begins to show you its ugly face.
At one time in my life, I was extremely lost, and I was just a violent human. I would just go to violence as an answer to things. And for like reasonings, I just don't understand why. Some people say that it's genetic, some people say it's learned, some people just say that is a demon inside of you that sometimes just gets woken up, and sometimes it's just being young and dumb, and sometimes you just think that violence is the way. And I was the person where I used to think that violence could have solved a lot of problems, but it didn't. It created something that I did not want to be ever a part of me and my soul. When I think back to the way I was and the way I used to think, and I look at my knuckles and I see that there are teeth marks to where my fist would hit people and their teeth would grind into my skin, and I still have those, and how my knuckles are disproportionate. It's a reminder, because when I see my hands, it reminds me that I do have blood on my hands, and I never ever once wanted to take it to an extreme. But I can say this: when you live that life, when you live a life of violence, a life of gangsters, of gangsterism, you're constantly doing this. You're constantly looking over your shoulder. If you're in that life, I can tell you that is not the way to live. The best way to live is to let that go, turn over a new leaf, like I have, learn from your mistakes, and to never repeat those. mistakes again.
During the recent corona pandemic virus, we've all had our eyes open. We've all learned that life is precious, and we should never take for granted any moment to spend with each other. We will overcome this. We will be stronger, and we will overcome this pandemic.
We've recently all have been affected by the COVID-19 coronavirus. And I wanted to just let each and every one of you know that we had to cancel and stop a lot of other interviews that was going to happen with How Many Chances. But I would like to say this. What we was able to do at Creighton Films, we was able to go to Biloxi, Mississippi. When we went to Biloxi, we went 24 hours prior to them being completely locked down and shut down, curfews and things of that nature. It was just simply weird and scary, and I would like to share this footage that we shot of Biloxi, Mississippi. For those of you who may or may not know about Biloxi, Mississippi, it is basically a Las Vegas that is on the beach. It's not a big Vegas, but it's like 8 casinos and 2 or 3 other ones that's surrounding it. But as you can see, that footage that you just saw, there was nobody there, and it's like that currently. It's weird because there's usually just tons of traffic, just people, tourists, and always something, and then it's like nothing. It's this whole pandemic has just got everybody's nerves shot. And I would like to say that, first off, if you are suffering from this, you have my deepest condolences. If you've had someone who has died, we've had someone die from this. Friends of our family, I've had a member of my family who I consider family, she got it. And I don't want to say anybody's names for privacy and things like that, but it has really hit me personally. And my condolences go to you. And I also would like to say a big shout out and thank you so much to everyone that is in the first responders, the doctors, the nurses, the EMTs, the firefighters, the police, everybody, not only in America, but everyone around the world, because this has affected all of us. This has affected each and every one of us, and together we can pull through this. And I believe that if we all wait, better things will happen, because we will pull through this together. I'm going to speak to you about something that is something I do not like talking about at all. Years back, my godchildren, Natalie and Chase DeBlaze, they were just little, and they were murdered. They were murdered by their biological father, John DeBlaze, and his girlfriend, Heather Keaton. They were common law husband and wife, but they were boyfriend and girlfriend. Now, you may ask, alright, how and when did you meet these people? I mean, well, I met John when Natalie was first born, so 10 years ago. And when Natalie was first born, that's when I met John. And John was a professional wrestler. That's his passion, that was his hobby, that's how he made extra money in life. That's just what he was. And me, with my IWC days and the countless other promotions I worked with in the past before IWC, John was, I always hung out with him, but John I considered my god brother. He was somebody that I looked at as my little brother, and I loved and cared and for him very much like my little brother. And I loved Natalie and Chase. They were my godchildren, because John knew I could never have kids because of my diabetes complications, and I will openly admit that will never happen. And he knew this, and he asked me if I would be godfather to his kids, Natalie and Chase. And of course I said yes, and I loved them more than life itself. Oh gosh, I could go on for hours about how much I spoiled them and did everything I could and just everything about them. John met Heather I can't remember the year, but I do remember meeting Heather and John. Well, Heather and John was over at Dalton's, Roger Champion's house, and he called me over and said, "Hey, you want to come over to this barbecue thing, and you want to meet John's girlfriend?" And I was like, I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. Yeah, and I was just coming over there mainly to see John and the kids, and to see this new girlfriend that he had, Heather. She was declared legally blind, like she had some type of eye problem. And when I first met her, she had her cell phone, up to her face like this. And as soon as I walked in the door, I saw her and I said, "Oh, get that phone away from your face, you're going to go blind." And she said, "I am legally blind." "Oh, my bad." Well, that's how I met them. And, well, as their relationship went further and further along, Heather got pregnant. Well, when Heather got pregnant, that's when things got really different with them, I would say. I last saw Heather and John and the kids in February, January. I don't want to be exact, but it was somewhere along that 2006, 5, and it was in January or February. I just remember it being really cold and me pulling up, and John was having problems with his van, and I took him to Walmart and somewhere else, and I dropped him off at his apartment, and I was telling John, I was like, "Brother, if you ever need anything, I live right down the road from these apartments. You just call me, and I'll be here." And he was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Well, I love you, John." And he was like, "I love you too." I was like, "All right." That's when I saw Natalie and Chase. And they come to the door, and I saw them, and I waved and was blowing them kisses, and I rolled down the window, and I yelled at them and said, "Hey, babies." And I said, "Y'all go back inside, it's cold. I love you." And I was giving them kisses, and that was the last time I saw them alive. A couple of months went by, and nobody saw them. But John would weirdly and oddly enough, he would call me on the phone. He would just give me the usual run-of-the-mill of him and Heather were trying to work things out, and they're trying to get life settled. He's trying to go to school and da-da-da-da-da. But he would always call me once a day or once every other day or something like that. A couple of months after, about a month or so, the phone calls just kind of slacked off. And I was getting worried. I didn't know what happened. And then the police contacted me. They were told me that Natalie and Chase were missing. As they were missing, I started getting more and more phone calls and this and that, and hearing this and hearing that, and da-da-da-da-da. And then finally, Heather got arrested up in Kentucky, and I was like, what are they doing in Kentucky? And then John was hiding out with some of the wrestlers in Pensacola, Florida. Oh my gosh, it was just a big mess. He was up there living with her, and then she kicked him out. Then I don't know how he got money for a bus ticket, but somehow he got money, and he came down to Pensacola. He started shacking up with all these old wrestling pals and buddies, and then one of them finally figured out, saw on the news or heard about it, what was going on. He called the cops on him. John got arrested, Pensacola, Florida. And I can't remember if Heather got arrested after that or not, if it was before or after. Now, when they got arrested, the district attorney's office told me that they wanted me to testify in both of the cases, because Heather was having a separate case and so was John, and it had to go to a grand jury. because they were shooting for the death penalty.
Lieutenant Kevin Thompson conducted an interview with Keaton about John DeBlaze about what she knew about Natalie and Chase DeBlaze. The couple moved to Kentucky shortly after the children had died. We listened to the interview of Keaton. This interview was conducted after she told her mother that the children were dead. She repeatedly kept telling Lieutenant Thompson that she was blind, and John took advantage of her gullibleness. She alleged that John raped and abused as well. John told Heather to leave Natalie in a closet with a tarp for hours while he was away at school. She does not mention in this interview that she duct-taped the children. Heather says after 8 hours, John came home and found Natalie unresponsive. In Heather's statement given to the police, John told Heather, "You can't leave me now because it's your fault."
And my function, what they wanted from me was basically to give the most accurate timeline that I could possibly give, because I have a pretty good memory, and I was able to give a distinctive timeline, and also I was able to give insight of the dynamics of John and Heather's relationship, which, to make a long conversation short, Heather wore the pants in that family. What Heather said, John did. No questions asked. I mean, that was just the way it was. Well, how was my godchildren, Natalie and Chase, how were they murdered? Natalie and Chase were both poisoned with antifreeze, and Heather would, and I suppose John as well, would mix antifreeze in their Kool-Aid and their food, and they would eat this poison. And when they were doing that and they were throwing up, as Heather has said in court before, they were throwing up black stuff. And then Heather, and I don't know if John had a part of this part of it, but I think he did, but I'm just not sure. But they would tie up Natalie with a like a broom, and they would put her in a closet and just leave her there. And after John saw that she was dying, and he strangled her, and John said that he called it a mercy killing. And Chase, and after they got finished with Natalie, they took her up to Chunchilla, Alabama, and just put her out in the woods and threw twigs and leaves and things like that over Natalie. With Chase, with my little man, he survived longer, but he started getting worse because you see they were forcing him to eat that antifreeze, and they were basically did the same type of thing and with what they did with Natalie. And then after they murdered Chase, they drove him up to Van Cleve, Mississippi, and threw him out in the woods. And John stated in court that he didn't dig a grave because he says the ground was too hard. So he just threw twigs and leaves and things like that over it. I need a break. I need to stop. Most people, they have that question that they always want to know. What happened to John and Heather?
At first, I didn't know that they had passed away, I mean, like their dad had killed them, up until Creighton picked me up one day and told me that, because we were going out to Ruby Tuesdays, and he told me that, I forgot his name, but he killed Natalie and Chase. And all I saw in Creighton's eyes were lost. He couldn't believe what happened either. It's like everybody went into shock. Anybody that knew them babies went into shock.
A Mobile judge agreed today with the jury recommendation and sentenced Heather Keaton to die by lethal injection. Keaton was convicted of 2 tortured deaths of her 2 stepchildren, Natalie and Jonathan Chase DeLays, 5 years ago. The sentencing hearing wrapped up an emotional case for the family members of the 2 young victims. Prosecutors say Natalie and Chase had their lives cut short because they were murdered by their parents. And today, the judge ruled that Heather will join her common-law husband, John, on death row. Earlier this year, a jury found Heather Keaton guilty of capital murder and manslaughter in the deaths of the 2 children. District Attorney Ashley Rich says it was a horrific act and they deserved the death penalty. The judge read over 25 pages of facts before rendering his decision. Part of those details described how Keaton had tortured and killed the children for several months. It also mentions that Keaton poisoned the kids with antifreeze, to a point, in her words, where they threw up black stuff. Keaton and John later dumped Chase's body in Van Cleve, Mississippi, and Natalie in the woods near Citronelle, Alabama.
After 70 witnesses and thousands of exhibits, the John DeBlaze case is over. John DeBlaze has been sentenced to death by lethal injection. The defense argued that John was just merely an accomplice, being led by his common-law wife, Heather Keaton. The state said that he did nothing to protect his children and deserves the ultimate punishment. Once both sides gave their statements, John spoke briefly to the court, saying, "I am going to ask for mercy. Ask for my life. I loved my kids. I did not kill my kids." This statement was heard but did not impact anyone's decisions. John has been sentenced to death by lethal injection and currently sits on death row.
How do I feel about all of this? Well, I am glad that they got what they got. They deserve it. John and Heather both. They really do, because John, he knew better. Anybody that knew him, and you could ask them, and they will tell you straight out that John knew better. John knew that he could have just driven 4 or 5 minutes down the road and dropped them kids off to me. He could have dropped them off at a police station. He may have gotten in trouble, but you know what? Natalie and Chase would be alive. He could have dropped them off at a fire department. He knew these things. These kids had grandparents that would have taken them. They had other godparents that would have loved them. We would have, oh my gosh. John knew better. The question also comes along of why? Why would they do this? Why would John even do this? And I will tell you, I asked that very same question to John's lawyers, to their private investigator. I asked that same question to the district attorney. I asked that same question to the FBI, because the FBI got involved with all of this. And they all basically said the same answer. They said John did this because he was in love with Heather. That's what they told me. As I think about it, it's 2020 right now, and that means that my Natalie, she would be 16 years old, and Chase, he would be 15 years old. Yeah, 16, 15, or yeah, so, or 15 to 14. But whew, they would be driving me crazy about right now, for sure. Natalie, I can only imagine. And Chase, I don't know what he would be doing. There's things about it that I've learned. You can't live in the past. You've got to live for the future. Because I know that Natalie and Chase would not me wanting to live in misery and live in the sorrow and the grief. And they would want me to keep moving and pushing forward. But, you know, every day, for 10 years now, and probably for the rest of my life, I'll miss them. I miss them. Every time I see Winnie the Pooh, I think about Natalie. Every time I see Toy Story or Stitch or something like that, I think of Chase. There is a day that goes by that I don't miss them with all of my heart, and I just I love them, and I miss them, and I will always love and miss them kids with all of my heart.
Yeah, when Creighton was, I don't know how old he was. He could walk, but he was little, and he was short anyway. He was not one of the taller ones, and he must have been about 2 or something like that. He was so short that when he walked in front of the counters in the kitchen, you could, if you were on one side, you couldn't see him. And so one night, before I come home, Shirley was getting supper ready, and she had decided we were going to have bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches. So she had a couple of pounds of bacon she was frying up, because there was 5 of us. So she had paper towels out, and she was frying and laying them on the counter that was between the dining area and the kitchen. So she'd fry them up, turn around, lay them on that, turn back around, fry. And she'd been frying and frying and frying. She noticed that it just seemed like the bacon wasn't getting anywhere. That no matter how much she fried it, it stayed the same, or maybe even shrunk a little. And she just kept. And so finally she was just standing there looking at it, and finally, while she was standing there looking, a little hand comes up over the counter, picks up one of the bacon, that disappears over the counter. She leans over and sees a little blonde head going out the door, through the utility room out onto the carport and throwing the bacon to our dog Blue. So he had eaten half of our supper, and so we had slim pickings on bacon that night with the bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches.
Of course, Universal Studios, him getting me on the Hulk and him not telling me that it went 0 to 60 before it came off the tunnel and did a flip, and I did not know what I was getting myself into, and he got me in the front row just so I can just experience the excitement, but then my back gave out and they tried to call paramedics on me. And then we went to an Irish pub and I had like Irish beef stew, but I still couldn't eat it because I was hurting so bad. Yeah, but we still had a good time though. We finished the next day out. I mean, we just finished it all up. And Marilyn Monroe look-alike flirted with me. Yeah, she blew kisses at me, so that made me feel special.
We've come to the ending of this documentary. I hope that you have enjoyed this, but most of all, I hope that you have learned something about yourself, or you've learned something from my previous mistakes. I've always told people about my life. I've said to them before, don't do what I say, just don't do what I have done in my past. That, or I just need to stay inside. And like, that is me though. You've got to just take life one day at a time. You've got to take each day as in, this is going to be possibly my last day. You have to live life to the fullest. Now, I do not know what you have taken from this. I hope that it's made your heart pound. I hope it's opened your eyes open to something. I hope that you have smiled. I hope you've cried. I hope you went through sadness. I hope you went through just having your mind open to something else. Maybe this one part of my life touched you. Maybe this other part touched you. I don't know. That is up to you.
Creighton is a kind person. He's not a mean person. He has a lot of problems with his health, and that affects a lot of things that he's been able to do and hadn't been able to do. It's affected his driving. It's affected a lot of things, but he's a good salesman. He likes to sell things and talk to people. He's easy to meet people, and I think he generally likes people in that respect. And I think that's about it.
I've known him the longest out of anybody I've ever really known. I trust him with my life. He pretty much is, like I said, my bestest friend.
And what I can say is, thank you for watching this, and thank you for giving me your time. Because, you gave me a chance, and thank you for watching. And most of all, you never know how many chances you really get in this life.